I'll do it now. Okay, perfect.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, everyone. Hi, Kelsey. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, we're going to be talking to Kelsey Mora, and we're going to be discussing how to talk to kids about cancer and everything that comes with it. So, Kelsey, I'll start with a quick introduction and share a little bit about why your work has been so important to me and others in the cancer community, and we'll get started with questions. So Kelsey is a dual certified child life specialist and a licensed clinical professional counselor based in the Chicagoland area. She provides custom support and guidance to families, parents, and communities impacted by medical conditions, trauma, grief, and everyday life stress. Kelsey guides parents and caregivers on how to best support their children and teens with difficult conversations and creates unique opportunities to help youth make connections and increase coping and communication throughout a cancer experience. Kelsey is also a private practice owner, mom of two, and the creator of the Method Workbooks, which includes the DOT Method, an interactive workbook tool that helps teach kids about cancer. Kelsey is the chief clinical officer of a nonprofit organization called the Pickles Group, where she designs curriculum and activities for kids and teens who have a parent with cancer and creates content to train parents, volunteers, and clinicians on this important topic. And you have so many amazing resources, Kelsey. And when I found your page, I loved it, and I wish so badly that I had you as I tried to navigate everything with my kids throughout my cancer experience and everything leading up to it. So you are going to be such a great person to share more with us today. I'm excited to learn.
Thanks.
So just a little background about me and why your work has been so important and impactful to me. My mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And shortly before she passed away, she found out she was the carrier of a genetic mutation linked to cancer, which probably led to her diagnosis. So shortly after, I decided to do my own genetic testing, found out I was the carrier of this inherited mutation. And so it increased my risk for breast cancer significantly, as well as a few other types of cancer. So after that, I decided to move forward with screenings and started to plan a preventative mastectomy. And then 2 weeks before my preventative surgery, I actually had an abnormality on my MRI and ended up with a cancer diagnosis 2 weeks before my surgery. So it's been kind of a crazy journey and trying to navigate from start to finish how to explain all of these hard things to my kids who were very aware of what cancer meant after they had watched my mom pass away, as well as other family members. And so to them, the word cancer meant death, right? So it's a very hard topic to talk to them about, especially when you are trying to explain like the genetic aspect and they start to realize that they are kind of carried, or they could be carriers of these mutations. So I cannot wait to get your insight on all of these hard things. So let's go ahead and get started with questions. So let's see. So like I said, as someone who was a high-risk mutation carrier, talking to my kids about my preventative surgery and the reason for it, which was my genetic risk, was kind of the first hurdle that we came to. So it can be really difficult for them. And they start asking questions like, wait, does that mean I have the gene too? And are you going to get cancer? And am I going to get cancer? And all of these hard questions where there's really not a definitive answer. And you want to have these open and honest conversations with them and empower them in case they are facing these same choices one day, but also not overwhelm them with information and cause anxiety. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that and how you approach those topics with kids.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing your personal experience and about your mom and everything. I know it can be hard to talk about. And I think you're being so thoughtful about thinking about how having previous experiences with cancer can kind of change the sensitivity of the topic for kids. And
Mhm.
so when it's a situation where kids are facing cancer of a secondary loved one and it can be really important for the adults in their life to distinguish that there are different types of cancers, different outcomes, different treatments. And in a situation where there's a genetic mutation and it's more preventative care, it can be so helpful to clarify really early that this is not cancer, that there are not cancer cells in my body, but the doctors learned something about my body that could make me at higher risk or more likely to get cancer. And so we're going to do things to actually prevent me from getting cancer and keeping me healthy as long as possible. And so that reassurance of this is what we learned and this is what we're going to do about it. And with their questions of am I going to get it, I think that's when we can take those conversations step by step. But certainly if a kiddo is asking that question, they're probably ready for more information about yeah, that is something that we're thinking about. And we're talking to the doctors about what tests we can do to learn more about your body, so that as a family, we can navigate, who needs what to keep us all healthy and safe for as long as possible. And I always recommend starting with just what they need to know and then following their lead in terms of what they want to know, which might mean those hard questions before you're ready for answers.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much. I love how you word that. It's so nice to hear it from somebody else. And I think, I don't know, it is knowledge is empowering to these kids. So I love that. I love how you worded it. Okay. So, as parents, how can we help our kids understand hard terms that we are, having to explain to them, like chemotherapy, or mastectomy or biopsy and all of these things that we want them to understand, especially when there's like a surgery with the recovery involved, right? That we need them to understand what's happening. So how can we provide information to them about these subjects? And is there an appropriate time frame in which we should present it to them, like months before it happens, weeks before it happens? What do you think?
Yeah. So there are a lot of resources for helping kids with these difficult topics. So certainly child life specialists are one of those. If you have if someone has access to a child life specialist in their healthcare team, which is a little rare in the adult world, which I can speak to more later in terms of what Pickles Group does. But I do on my account, my Instagram account, Child Life Therapist, I include every Monday a how to teach kids about, and I've covered a lot of the topics relevant to this cancer experience in terms of biopsy. I'm doing mastectomy this coming week. I've done surgery, I've done chemotherapy, radiation, and in my workbook, the DOT method, I actually include a glossary of terms with child-friendly ways to explain some of those complicated topics. The DOT method that I've created actually is a great resource for this. Not to be about promoting, but really I created it because I feel like it's the best way to do this. Is to actually lump treatment together, right? So like mastectomy, chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, they all have the same goal. The goal is to get rid of those cancer cells if it's already a cancer diagnosis. And so when kids cross out those cancer cells, which they do through the DOT method, it doesn't really matter what the treatment is. It's helping them understand why we're doing it. And then you can talk about the details in terms of recovery, not being able to drive, not being able to hold them, having drains, those types of things. And you can kind of share that information in, bite-sized conversations. In terms of how far in advance, back to my, what kids need to know, I do recommend focusing on what's coming first. So often with breast cancer, it might be a biopsy or a surgery first, or it might be finding out about the cancer cells and waiting for treatment. So that kind of helps you to figure out, okay, what do they really need to know right now? And not doing it so far in advance that they have a ton of time to get anxious about it, but not doing it so close that they don't have enough time to ask questions and really understand. So there is a rule that says like number of days per age. So really what that means is that the younger the child, the closer to the event, the older the child, they can handle a little bit more information. And older kids sometimes get upset when they feel like their parents know something that they don't. And so the more time we can alleviate them trying to figure things out and be detective on their own, the better for sure.
Yeah, I love that. And that was definitely the case with my oldest, who's 12. I have a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. And each one of them took everything so differently. Like my oldest wanted to know every single detail, when it's happening, what's going on, why are we doing this, why? And my youngest was like, okay, you're having surgery? Okay. So it's so interesting to watch them, but also, you want them to be informed and understand what's happening and not feel like you're hiding something. So that was great. Thank you, Kelsey.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, kind of going along those same lines of like the post-op period. So once we've gotten to the point where we're having some kind of surgery if necessary, and felt like they've kind of grasped that. The next hurdle that we faced as parents was to explain to them and prepare them for like surgery and recovery and how that would impact their normal and how much detail to give them, like you mentioned at the drains, or like, you can't sit in my lap right now because I have an incision, and like those kind of things. So do you have any suggestions for making that process go as smoothly as possible for them, and like
Yeah.
schedules and how they'll be interrupted?
Yeah. I think most kids, regardless of their age, are often thinking, how's this going to affect me, right? That's a really
Mm-hmm.
common question. I was
Mm-hmm.
just working with a family, and their child's first question was like, well, so you won't be at my soccer game, right? They're often thinking about
Yeah.
themselves, which is totally
Yeah.
developmentally appropriate. And so,
Mm-hmm.
again, like thinking about how is this going to disrupt them the most? Like maybe their parents not going to be able to drive them. For younger kids, not being able to hold them is a big challenging change. Not being able to maybe cook meals. So the caregiving disruption, I think, is important. For younger kids, it's actually really helpful to use play, obviously, to show them. So, I have used, obviously, the dot method is play based, it's
Yeah. Yeah.
drawing and writing. I put band-aids, I think I have one, right here. I put band-aids just on the body
Oh,
to show
so
people
smart.
where the owies
Mm-hmm.
are. I have it right here. um,
Oh my goodness, I love
also,
it.
using a doll. I've used dolls and like put bandages around the chest. I've created drains out of pipe cleaners and pom poms. So
Oh,
really
that's
helping
so
kids
cool.
understand, yeah, well, using their hands-on tools. Playing doctor, playing
Yeah.
with dolls and animals, stuffed animals for younger kids, because I think
Yeah.
just sitting and talking about it can be hard for them to digest.
Yeah. I love that. I love those play ideas. I wish I would have thought of some of this. We've done like a couple doll things, but like the band-aids and the things that they already are kind of aware of and like what their purpose is, and like applying those to explaining all of this. That's amazing. I love it. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's see. So a lot of us will face changes, at least when you're going through like a mastectomy. There are physical changes that are happening too. And so mom comes home and she looks different, right? What's going on? Like, how do you approach those changes in appearance? Or like someone who's going through chemotherapy and is going to lose their hair. How do you approach those kind of topics with them, and like how to prepare them for those appearance changes?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a hard question. I mean, same thing, kind of that anticipation for the things that you can
Mhm.
anticipate. So if the doctors are communicating that, this type of chemotherapy is going to come with hair loss, like preparing children for that. Again, with the dot method, you can cross out cells on the hair, like you can even make hair out of like yarn and get rid of it and things like that, and explain that it's made out of healthy cells. And the chemotherapy is so strong that when it gets rid of the sick cells or the cancer cells, it also gets rid of the healthy cells, and that causes this side effect, which is covered in the workbook. But certainly, telling them in advance, so it's not as shocking. And if there are some shocking moments, let's say it's a day where a parent feels really nauseous and is throwing up, like being able to explain what's going on to a kid and just say, like, I know this might feel really scary. It's the medicine that's making me, feel sick while it's working on getting rid of those cancer cells. I think the most confusing thing for kids about cancer is that the person they love gets sicker before they get better, if it's an active treatment
Yeah.
situation where
Mhm.
the prognosis is really hopeful. And so it's like, so wait, you're taking medicine to get better, but you look a lot more sick. Like, I don't understand. And so being able to explain to
Confusing.
them that, yeah, that can be really helpful. So I think preparation, focusing on what they need to know. Also, using if a child was going to visit a parent in like the hospital, it can be helpful to even show them like a photo or a drawing to kind of make it feel less intense before they walk in there. So you're going to see some, IV poles, and here's what they look like, and things like that too.
Yeah, great ideas. Thank you. Okay, so then when it comes to the actual like cancer diagnosis, how do you approach explaining to that in in an age appropriate way? So there's just this delicate balance, at least in my experience, I found of giving too much information and making them feel overwhelmed or anxious about what's happening, and just enough, right? Like we talked about, to help them feel more empowered and more control of the situation. So, and it's hard because cancer is unpredictable, and right, you can't really say, oh, it's going to be fine, I'm going to get better. Like you can't tell because you don't know. So, you can't tell them you're going to be okay. So we want to protect them from the hards, but kids are so smart. And I found that if you are avoiding telling them some things, they usually figure it out, or they know something, they can feel it, right? They know something's going on. So we always try to be open and honest with our kids. So how do you approach like the actual diagnosis and like how to explain to them what's going on? It's probably very similar to some of the things you've already shared, but anything different or that you would like to add?
Yeah, certainly I always say that just because parents aren't talking about it doesn't mean kids aren't thinking about it or worrying about it or noticing it. So it is important to have those honest conversations rather than them trying to make sense of things
Mhm.
on their own. But yeah, I mean, it is really important, I think, to explain that it is cancer because cancer is different than any other type of illness.
Mhm.
So when we just use the word like sick, or they think about, especially younger kids, like preschoolers, they think about what sick means to them. So they think about boogers and coughs and the medicine that can make you better in a
Yeah.
couple days, or snuggles or
Mhm.
soup or whatever. And that's not how cancer works. And so being able to explain like that I have a different type of sickness. It's not contagious. You can't catch it, but it is going to take me a longer time to get my medicine. And explaining the hope. The doctors are really hopeful that if I take this really strong
Mhm.
medicine, even though it's going to be really hard and we're going to have a lot of changes, that I will get better. Being honest about, uncertainties as well, that this is a really serious type of cancer and we're going to try these medicines, but we're not sure. But yeah, it is really so much better to try to give an age appropriate version of the truth. And not every parent feels comfortable doing that. And so, figuring out what version of the truth a parent can start with and then kind of building
Yeah,
on that as they go through their experience.
I love that. Okay. So, for very young children, especially those who are like ages 2 and younger at the time of diagnosis, what suggestions do you have for people who are wanting to have these open conversations with their kids and be honest with them, but they're just not to that point yet? Like, when do you, as a parent, revisit that um, and start to explain those things to them?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the reality of cancer is that it often does last for a long time. And so a kid who's 2 at the start of a cancer experience might be 5 or 6, by the end, or when entering survivorship or things like that, depending on the type of cancer. And so um, certainly families can wait until they feel like their child is more ready or they're more ready for information. And in that case, I always recommend starting with like, you're getting so much bigger and so much older that I think you're ready for more information about why I go to the doctor or why I take medicine. So
Yeah.
it's okay to express that now is the right time rather than like I've been withholding information or I haven't been honest with you.
Yeah.
You've been doing it the best way that you thought was for your family, and so being able to validate that now is just as good a time as ever. But certainly, like with younger kids, I know there was a question on the comments on the Instagram post. Starting really simple with really young kids and not expecting them to understand everything. But that's like also where, so the dot method started with a 2 year old, where it was like, let's just talk about good cells, bad cells, or healthy cells, sick cells, and then explain that treatment is crossing them out. The child actually had cancer, but you could do that with any situation,
Yeah.
and just helping them understand that there are these sick cells in your body and we're trying to get rid of them. And then little by little, as they get older, as they experience more, then you can add on to that, but you kind of have a foundation. You can remind them over and over again. Little kids need a lot of repetition. Oh, remember, mommy's getting those sick cells taken care of. I have to go to the doctor today, or the medicine that's getting rid of those sick cells is so strong. I don't feel good
Mhm.
today. Like you have a shared language to keep going back to, and that can be really helpful. So
Your
I have
language.
seen kids as young as 2 be able to understand these concepts in a really simple way. So yeah.
And you do a really good job on your Instagram. I love you talk about that shared language a lot. And I love that. And that's always so helpful. It's a great reminder for me. Every time I see those posts pop up, I'm like, okay, yeah, we have this already kind of established way that we talk about this, and it has been really helpful for me with my kids as I've kind of revisited some of those things too as things change.
Mhm.
So yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll add personally, I've shared on my account, but my dad has cancer and he actually just had to go to the hospital this week. And my
Mhm.
son is 4 and my daughter is 2. And I was emotional, understandably. He
Mhm.
hasn't really had a lot of hospitalization. So I was like, oh gosh, this is hard. And it was like preschool drop off and I was crying. And I was able to just say to my son, like, remember, grandpa has cancer. He's in the hospital right now because he wasn't feeling good. His body was hurting. They're going to take care of him, but it was so much easier because he already knows that grandpa has cancer,
Yeah.
grandpa's sick, he gets
Mhm.
medicine. I didn't have to start from zero. Um, and I think had I not said anything and was just crying, he probably would have been a lot more scared. Like, why is my mommy
Yeah.
crying while dropping me
Right.
off at school? And then I just let him go to class. So it was really
Yeah.
important that I could just tell him based off of previous conversations that we had had. And my
Yes.
daughter's only 2, but she was like, "Grandpa, hospital, grandpa sick." Like
Yeah.
she's able to repeat back.
Yeah.
So yeah.
They figured out they're so amazing. Kids are so amazing in how they take all that information. And I'm sorry about your dad. I saw that post and I love it. And I think anyone who's been in that situation can really empathize with those feelings that come with that and trying to explain to kids. So thank you for sharing that too. So, anything else that you would like to share about like coping strategies that you would recommend for kids throughout this process, or like how we can help them maintain a sense of normalcy through this experience? Anything else that you'd like to add about that?
Yeah, there was something I was going to say earlier related to all the changes in both
Mhm.
physical or, other types of changes, whether it be their routine or their schedule. Really important to explain to kids what's going to be different, but also what's going to be the same. So helping them know, like, you're still going to go to school, but the neighbor's going to take you, or
Yeah.
you have a game this weekend, but grandpa's going to be there, or whatever. Like helping them understand, like, okay, these things are consistent, these things are normal, and there's some parts of it that are going to feel different. That's a good way to kind of find that strike that balance of normalcy when things aren't really normal.
Mhm.
And sometimes we see behaviors from kids. I just saw a post today that resonated with me around, um, when we see a behavior, look for the cause, right? And so like if kids are
Mhm.
acting some kind of way, I've had parents come back to me and say, oh, this week, like my kiddo, said he didn't want to go to school, or my kid, said they weren't hungry. And it's like, but
Mhm.
but I just had surgery and there's a lot going on. And so being able to validate for that for kids, like, oh, we just have a lot going on. And it makes sense that you might feel, X, Y, and Z. So really naming feelings, practicing coping strategies, having some quiet moments in the day, before bed, deep breaths, mindfulness strategies. I post a lot about mindfulness, getting outside, like whatever you can do to help kids practice these strategies
Mhm.
always, but especially during a chaotic time. And those are transferable skills for life. So it's actually really
Yeah.
helpful for them to have experiences using strategies during a difficult time.
Okay. That's great. Thank you. I love that. And then just the calm. I don't know. I just think how much that will help my kids to even just have that like moment of calm before bed. I love it. Okay. So, kind of on this along the same lines, with kids and communicating with their teachers and other adults who might be like play a role in your kid's life, and need to be aware of these issues that are going on in your home. Because I know, at least for my kids, like my youngest, who I told you earlier, was very like, okay, whatever, it's all good, like no emotion, no. But the day that I had my surgery, and I did communicate with their teachers, just heads up, something's going on, just in case, you see any behavior changes or they're emotional, like this is what's going on, just so you're aware. But my 7-year old, who had no emotion throughout the whole thing, cried at school most of the day. So it's so important to let them know, right? But any suggestions for that, or how much information you actually have to give? I know a lot of people I've spoken to are very private and don't like to share what's going on with other adults, when they're just
Mhm.
trying to figure it out themselves. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. It's such a such a helpful example, I think, for other parents to hear because I that your daughter was crying at school because I think that
Mhm.
we think like, oh, they'll go to school, they'll be fine, they'll be distracted, they'll be with their friends, and you just never know when those feelings are going to surface. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I totally respect families who want to navigate these times with more privacy and dignity. And, you know, the school is one of it is the child's most constant environment besides
Mhm.
home. They spend so many hours there. And so it can be really helpful to notify school. And back to the shared language, like also helping a child establish a shared language with how they're talking about it with friends. You
Mhm.
mentioned you have a
Mhm.
12-year-old. Like that's a really sensitive age where they might be struggling with like, how much do I tell my friends and what should my friends know? Maybe I don't want my friends to know. So working to figure out like what is our narrative and who do we want to share that with and how can be helpful. I have a resource of like a sample letter that I've created that is a free download through my email page, and I recently posted some tips for how to notify school. I've also through my private practice worked with families to actually draft a document that shares here's how our family's talking about this, like here's the language we're
Mhm.
using, here's some books that we recommend, and sharing that with even with like grandparents, because it's so helpful for kids to have their adults using consistent language as well. If you have a 2-year old that you're using the dot method with and you're talking about sick cells, let's say, and then someone else uses the word cancer, well, that might make a parent not be that most trusted source of information. And so it can be helpful if you're picking really specific language. That's the risk of not using the word cancer, is making sure that the adults are all on the same page.
Yeah, very important. I love that. Thank you. That was a great point. I didn't, not something I ever thought about, but um, yeah, so important. Okay, so you've talked a little bit about some of the resources that you have developed, like your like Pickles group and the dot method. But will you share a little bit more about these and how people access these and take advantage of all of these amazing things that you offer?
Yeah, of course. So the dot method is a passion project of mine. It's a workbook that takes kids and families through, or clinicians, guides kids through learning about cancer cells, treatment, and then also expressing their feelings and coping. So there's activities throughout the whole workbook. It looks like this. It's available on Amazon. I also sell discounted bulk copies to hospitals, clinics, and nonprofits for if they are wanting to give them out to their patients. But to give you an idea, the main page, this one's been drawn in, but is basically identifying colors that represent healthy cells, cancer cells, and treatment, and then walking through like putting those in the body and getting rid of them. This is for any cancer relationship. So at the beginning, the kids actually are prompted to draw the person who has cancer. And so here's that page. So for some kids, it might be themselves, it might be a friend, it might be a sibling, it might be a parent, a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle. And then there's talks of treat of side effects. And so they talk about what side effects their loved one has, how to deal with a good and difficult day. This is one of my favorite pages where kids can actually draw feeling faces to represent the range of feelings that they might experience. They get to list who they can call for support.
Oh,
Write the
that's great.
names of people that make you feel better just by talking or being with them, as well as drawing or writing about things they do that make them feel happier and calmer. So it does incorporate the coping piece as well. And so the overall like dot method experience is this, where it's creating the healthy cells, the cancer cells, and then treatment to get rid of the cancer cells. I do talk in the book about when it's not possible to get rid of cancer cells. So I do a lot of grief work and death and dying. This book is not necessarily focused on the death and dying. It's more about
Mhm.
treatment, but there is a page on that everyone's goal is to get rid of as many cancer cells. And when that's not possible,
Mhm.
you might shift focus to some of these other things. So that's the dot method. And it's in this comprehensive workbook that can be used by a child of any age. It can be done cover to cover or kind of spaced out in the different activities. And then Pickles Group is a separate entity, and it's a nonprofit organization that I helped found, and it was founded by 3 founding families who hired me as the clinician to support their families when they had a parent with
Mhm.
cancer. So we have now grown tremendously. We have a team of 4 staff, a really robust board of directors, and everything we do is free. So I do a lot of talks on how to talk to kids about cancer. We have a free family cancer support kit that has developmental considerations, tips, the child-friendly terms in a glossary. That's free. Families can request it on our website. Hospitals can request it. We've distributed over 20,000 across the world. And then we have youth programs for kids. So we have kids first through 12th grade that can go through this Connect Over Cancer curriculum that I designed, and they get to meet other kids their age across the country who have a parent with cancer, and they work through connection activities, coping skills, and fun. And the DOT method is one of the activities in the curriculum. And then we're launching all kinds of other programming to help kids foster and develop and strengthen peer relationships. And those are all led by volunteers. So I build the curriculum, we train the volunteers, and then they deliver the groups. So a lot of free available resources. We also have the support kit available in Spanish, the webinars in Spanish, and we have an enrollment form in Spanish as well. I'm a bilingual Spanish speaker, and so that's really important. And we're really focused on equity and inclusion through Pickles Group as well.
I love it. And I love that you have virtual meetings as well, which is so helpful too. And I know there's in person, but also virtual. So anyone around the country can access these meetings, and your kids can participate with other kids and really have that sense of community and meet with people who understand what they're going through. So amazing. I love it.
Yeah. We've had kids join from like rural Illinois to like Manhattan, they're just like, it's really cool. And it's accessible anywhere. We do have some in-person programming here in the Chicagoland area, and we played around with more in-person programming, but truly when you have a parent with cancer, it is so hard to get your kids places and to commit to that. And so virtual has actually been a lot more accessible. And it's also helped us reach families across race and socioeconomic status as well. So yeah.
Wonderful. You're amazing. Okay, so the last question. If you could give one piece of advice to parents who are at high risk of cancer or dealing with a current cancer diagnosis, what would you tell them?
Oh man, I want to give like 3 answers, but I feel like they're all related.
You can maybe.
I would say take a deep breath, just breathe, take care of you first. The whole airplane, you put your oxygen mask on before your kid. Like, it's really hard to have difficult conversations if you don't feel regulated. 2, be as honest as possible. I always say an age appropriate version of the truth. It doesn't have to be every detail, but it should be close to the reality. Like the flip side of that, which is a little bit more negative, I'm just like, don't lie, right? We don't have to tell kids every detail, but we don't want to tell them something that's blatantly not true. And then the third is, don't be afraid to show your feelings. It can actually be really helpful. I think a lot of our society really has previously taught to hide your feelings. And I really have the opposite approach, where I think kids, and I've seen it in my work over, the last decade and a half, of kids feel so much safer and more empowered when their parent is just like, this is really hard. Like, I feel sad too. And if you're taking care of yourself, it won't cross that line where they have to take care of you. But certainly you can cry in front of your kids. You can name your own feelings, and that can be super therapeutic for kids. So that was longer, but I would say deep breath, honest version of the truth, and then share your feelings. At Pickles Group, we have 3 tips. We say share information, share expectations, and share feelings.
I love it. Yeah, 3 is great. The last one especially resonated with me because I found, as I've been open to sharing my own emotions with my kids, they are more willing to share theirs with me. And so it becomes more of like a connecting experience and rather than something that makes you drift apart. So I love that one. So thank you so much, Kelsey. You're amazing. If anyone wants to find you, tell us where they can find you. All your resources.
So my professional Instagram is Child Life Therapist. I also have a Instagram for my resources called The Method Workbooks, and I have websites for those as well. But Child Life Therapist is probably the easiest one to find. And then for Pickles Group, it's picklesgroup.org, and the Instagram is Pickles Group as well. So that's another great place to look. On the Pickles Group website, I do curate a list of resources. And so the dot method is one of those, but there's a whole bunch of different books and websites and themed list of resources for cancer and grief support for kids.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so, and I think on my Instagram, I have a highlight bubble. It's a resources highlight bubble, and I'm pretty sure I already have your stuff listed in there, but I'll double check and I'll add it too. So there's a link there for anyone who wants just an easy way to find her. And I think that's all the questions I have, but I am so grateful for you taking the time out of your busy, busy schedule with all the things that you're doing to share your expertise. And I know it's going to be so helpful. It's been helpful to me already. And I know so many people who are going to be so excited to have access to all of this. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Krista. Appreciate you.
Okay,
Bye.
have a good day. Bye.